welcome back, you guys. This is part 2 of my updated cooling on my AMD Ryzen system. Again, I'm running the AMD Ryzen 3900X with a Asus Crosshair VIII Hero Wi-Fi mainboard. What I was using before was the Corsair H110i GT. It's a 280 millimeter radiator all-in-one combo, using the obviously dual 140 millimeter fans. I chose that specifically because of the 140 millimeter fans. I wanted something that was able to effectively cool, push a lot of air but at a lower RPMs on the fan to try to save on noise. It worked really well. I've had it about 5 years now. My only issue was with this AMD Ryzen system, it seemed like it was running a little bit warm, especially when I was running anything that was CPU intensive. I actually ran through on the first part of this. Unfortunately, the audio for it didn't turn out too well, so I'm going to try to fix that. But recalling from that, I had ran Cinebench R20. I ran it in their quiet mode and then the extreme mode. And I will say, this is after cleaning the radiator, making sure that everything was completely dusted out. The fans were clean. The filters were clean. I put new CPU paste on. I used Arctic Silver 5. I've used that for years. It's kind of my go-to. I know a lot of people do use it. I really don't want to move up to the liquid thermal pastes, the liquid metal ones. To me, there's just not enough experience with it yet, and enough history with it for me to really justify the dangers that go along with it. And the Arctic Silver 5 to me does perfectly fine. I don't go for extreme overclock, so I'm not worried about it. I did reapply the thermal paste to it, and I ran it for about a week. Typical on-off scenarios, running it for some gaming for a couple hours, shut the system down, let it cure, run it for some gaming to heat it up again, cooled it down, just general on-off applications for about a week, and then went ahead and did the measurements on there. What I ended up with was a max temperature of 75 degrees Celsius as measured by MSI Afterburner for my CPU core. That was for the multi-core run of Cinebench R20. For the single core, I hit max temp of 58 degrees Celsius. Now that matched up pretty much exact for quiet and for extreme. So for me, it just didn't justify the extra noise. The quiet was very doable. It was really silent, didn't have any issues with it. The extreme, however, sounded like a jet engine taking off. I mean, it was horrible. I could actually hear it all the way upstairs in my house. That's how loud it was. When I kicked it on, my wife actually yelled down to me if everything was okay because she heard the fans kick up so loud. So that's how bad it was. Now I also ran 3D Mark Extreme, just because the CPU test on there really taxes the processor, and I hit 71 degrees Celsius on that. Now I am running software in the background as well, the Asus Armory Crate, and the standard things that are just trying to get it to catch the fan speeds and control voltages, and my overclocks, MSI Afterburner, OBS for my streams here. I'm obviously have Cinebench R20 pulled up right now. As you can see right now for my core clock, it is really low. It's not really doing a whole lot of anything, so I mean, obviously it's not going to be kicking up too much. My CPU temperature, it's hovering, mid 30s, capping out right around 40 or so. I'm going to clear the history here. That way I have a good baseline to start with. Up here on the left side you can see my old scores that I did hit with the CPU. So I'm going to go ahead and try to run this again. Now I do know, again, running all this stuff in the background, especially OBS, I do have it set to use the CPU pretty aggressively. So I mean, 12 cores, 24 threads, I figure I can spare a few threads for that. It definitely doesn't affect my gaming. Really, I think I've lost maybe 1 or 2 FPS. I mean, nothing really that I've noticed, so I'm not too worried about it. Now, one other thing I did do is I measured the components around my CPU area. The VRMs, the capacitors around there, the heat sinks, my top M.2 drive. I got a pretty steady constant temperature of about 38 degrees Celsius around the CPU socket. The reason I did that is that Corsair cooler has just got the pump water block combo on the processor, so the only cooling it has is from that radiator and the fans. Now the new all-in-one that I went with was the Asus Ryujin, if I pronounce that right, but it's the 360 millimeter radiator, so it's got the triple 120 fans. Now that has a 4th fan that's actually embedded in the pump water block area. Not sure exactly the size. It's like a little 60 millimeter fan, I think it is, or so. It's not very big. I will say it is definitely, it's annoying. It can be loud. I've got it turned down to the minimum setting possible on it. I will say they need to do some work with the Asus Armory Crate in trying to control the fan speeds on this thing, because if I go to quiet mode, it puts it supposedly down to the minimum 20%, which is the lowest fan speed it can go, it says, is 20%. But it bounces around. It'll go down to 20%, and then it speeds up, slows down, speeds up, slows down. It just doesn't stay constant, even though it's on a straight line fan curve. I've even tried going through and do a custom setting, the user settings, and setting it just at a straight 20, 21, 22, 23%, all different settings, just to make sure it wasn't just something, in a buggy, where it's, reading that 20% and kind of flipping out, and it doesn't stay. I hit apply, I hit save, it sets it, and as soon as I exit out of Armory Crate, it kicks it right back up again. So that is probably my biggest complaint, is I can hear that little bit of a high-pitched whine coming from that fan. I mean, I almost wish I could actually just disable it, but one of the big features that I got it for was I wanted to see how it cooled the components around the CPU. Now, I did run this, ran it pretty heavy for a while, just so I could concentrate on taking temps of inside the case, so I could have those ready, and it did drop it quite a bit. Max I hit on the components around there with this fan on low was around about 31 degrees Celsius. So I mean, that's a pretty significant drop. 7-degree drop I will definitely take. Again, that's just keeping it on this low setting. I can kick it up really high, and I mean, it's really, really loud. It's like 31, 32 decibels, and it's quite annoying. It's a really high-pitched whine, and it does a good job at cooling it. It'll drop it another 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, but the trade-off on that, I am not willing to sacrifice my sanity or my ears to have that thing run so fast. So that would probably be my only complaint, other than, well, my 2 complaints I should say, is the noise from that fan and the controls in Asus Armory Crate. I don't know if Asus tried to run a blower style fan on this instead of a regular fan. If they would have used like a sideways blower style, I think that could have moved more air sideways rather than a fan blowing down and then trying to push it itself out. Definitely probably would have ran a lot quieter. I mean, I've heard blowers run really quiet. So, I mean, that's something maybe they could look at. I doubt they're going to listen to me. I mean, obviously nobody compared to, a big company like Asus, but, I mean, if they're willing to listen, by all means, they need to do something about the noise. I don't know if they really quality controlled this or not, but it's loud. It really is. And that's the biggest complaint I'm seeing in other forums, as well as the noise level from it. But we're going to go ahead and run this Cinebench R20. I'm going to see what these temperatures kick up to. Again, this is on their quiet mode, so I'm going to see how this one runs. Get that going here. Again, I'm not expecting miracles. Anything cooler is good. I mean, so far, I'm like about a 4-degree drop. 3 to 4 degrees. Again, this is the quiet mode. I don't think I'm going to be willing to run this at the extreme settings just because of the noise. I just wouldn't be able to justify it. But CPU looks like we hit right about 73 degrees max, which is a couple degrees cooler. So I mean, compared to that H110i GT, which I don't believe is available any longer. I don't think you can even get it. I think it's now the H115, which I think they modified it a little bit. This got a little bit better cooling. I mean, a couple degrees Celsius, nothing major. For an AIO, I mean, that's not bad. It did hit just a little bit higher of a score here on the multiprocessors. You can see 30 points, which is very negligible. So pretty much I would call that right in line with the speeds. And I did max out at 4600. You can see it kind of bounce around a little bit. I'm going to try running this as single. Again, let's reset this. And let's run a single test. Now I know this one takes a little bit longer, just because it's only running the one core. So I mean, it's not near as fast as running the multi-core. But again, this is just to stress the one core. This should kick up. Yeah, it's kicking right up there, almost near the 4600 megahertz. So I mean, it's running it at the pretty much max clock speed there. I am on the default overclocking on this. I do not have it set to a custom overclock. I could. I mean, I've seen a lot of the forums where they've gone through and done custom clocks. I just didn't see the sense in doing it, though. The AMD Ryzens really do a great job of controlling their own clocks, so I kind of just let them do their own thing. If I was going for competition or going for some type of world record, obviously I wouldn't be using an AIO. I'd probably be using liquid nitrogen anyways, and probably be going for some really high clock speeds. So I'm going to leave it as is. That way I can get a true, what I call, real world test. I mean, this is what the average person is going to be doing anyways. Most your average people aren't going to be buying a $450, $500 CPU, $300 main board, and trying to overclock the heck out of it. So we'll give this a couple minutes here to finish up its testing, and we'll move on. I am going to run a 3D Mark Extreme again, just so I can see if this works or not. I have been having issues with OBS, which the streaming software I use. Streaming games, even at 144 FPS, which I've got a 144 megahertz monitor, so I don't have any issues streaming games. They're stutter free, they're lag free. There's no issues whatsoever. Yet when I come to 3D Mark, I try to run the benchmarks, and it just seems that OBS stutters all over the place. I've searched the net, I've tried to change some settings on it this time, so let's hope that it doesn't stutter like it did the last time. I mean, that's my hope at least. But looks like so far it's holding steady, pretty steady at 55, 56 degrees Celsius, which is what I got on the Corsair AIO. That was the only time I showed any real fluctuation in the temperatures. With that AIO, I had 58 degrees Celsius on the single core for quiet and 56 on the single core for extreme. Whereas this one, you can see I'm hovering right at 55 to 56 on the quiet. Again, I don't really want to run the extreme. It's just so loud. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big fan of it, so I'm going to leave it as is. I will include in the comments section what I get on the extreme. It's just, with how loud it is, it really picks up on this mic, and I don't want to completely annoy you guys with that. I already know this microphone that I have picks up some of the ambient sounds pretty good. So I mean, I again don't want to completely annoy people and drive you guys away, so I'm going to spare your ears from that. We need just a couple more minutes, guys, and I should have this run done here. Now, as you can see, this isn't really GPU intensive at all, which would be why, if you look up here, my GPU temperature, it's still at the minimum. I mean, barely being used at all here. Pretty much none of the memory is being used on the GPU. Core clock is down clocked, same with the memory. As you can see, my fan speed, it's reading 2%, but it's actually off. It's got no fan speed right now. I do have it set to run silent, so the fans don't even kick in until the GPU is kicked up to, I believe it's 35 degrees Celsius. So, I mean, that's kind of where I wanted it to, well, it's at 36 degrees Celsius, so I might have kicked that up to 40. But it does a great job of keeping it cool, so I mean, it just saves some more noise. The original fan curve on there, I think, kicked it on at 35, so I think I bumped up to 40 if I remember right. Other than that, as you can see, I'm using about 8 gigs of RAM. I do have 32 gigs of DDR3600 in this system. I do have it overclocked to DDR3733, which is also the max that the Infinity Fabric will run on the AMD Ryzens. Anything past 3733, and it goes from a 1-to-1 ratio to a 2-to-1 ratio. or a 1-to-2 ratio. So it really slows the system down. It causes just some bottlenecking. I wasn't willing to sacrifice my performance. I could have gone with faster memory, like a DDR 4200 or 4400, 4600, something a lot faster, and that kind of makes up for that 2-to-1 ratio. But it's a lot more expensive too. This kit that I have, it is the Trident Royal Z. It's the special edition one that comes with the display box for it. I really enjoy the memory. However, I wish that I could have gotten the Trident Neo, just because it's made for AMD. It's got a little bit lower of a cast latency, and I think tighter timings to help with the AMD processors run better. This one is a cast latency of 17. I did bump it down to 16 though, with 1T timing and overclocked, and it runs pretty steady. Does a great job. I'm not going to complain in the least bit. It looks beautiful. The new Asus the AIO water cooler, I really enjoy the aesthetics of it. I will say I like the RGB that it has on it and the little LCD display. I think that's a really cool feature. You can do custom GIFs, you can do JPEGs, you can do little animations and stuff. I did have some issues trying to load custom images. It has to be within a certain size, and I went through and edited some little photos that I had to that size, and I met all the requirements, but it still wouldn't upload the image. So I think their software is still a little bit buggy. It'll do custom messages as well. That worked perfectly fine. But my hopes is to get something that goes with the same color scheme as my inside of my PC. So hopefully they'll get that ironed out here in the next coming months. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. But all right, that run is done. Looked like towards the end there it started calming down to a little bit, 54, and you can see that temperature is coming down rather quickly. So I mean, it does an effective job cooling it, especially once it has no load on it. It does a good job. We scored a whopping 4 points less than my last run on the single core. So I mean, again, that I'll chalk that up to standard variations. So that looks pretty good there. Let's go ahead and do this 3D Mark run. As you can see, I have just a standard little suite of benches that I run. Nothing major. I mean, there's nothing special. Blender, I hate Blender, honestly. I know a lot of people use Blender for the CPU tests. I personally dislike it. It's just personal preference. But now this is going to kick up my GPU now as well. It's going to really tax the whole system running this. And the reason I'm doing this is not only to see the CPU temperature, but I want to see how the rest of the system is affected as well. GPU wise, it really shouldn't affect that. I'm running a NVIDIA RTX 2080. It is the EVGA ACX 2.0 cooler on there. So it's got the dual fans. Does a really great job of cooling. I really enjoy it. I wanted the 2080 titanium, but the 2080 titanium runs, you know, $700, $800, $900 entry level. I mean, for a good one, you're looking at, you know, $1,100, $1,200, and that's just way ridiculous in my opinion. It shouldn't be anywhere near that much. And you can see 3D Mark loading up here. For me, it is running super smooth. This is on the extreme settings. We're hitting 1,965 megahertz on the core for the GPU, 7,000 megahertz memory. We're running right at 4,350 megahertz, 4,600 megahertz. CPU is hitting, you know, 26 frames per second or so. This is where I've been having issues with OBS, where it's not actually picking up how smooth the screen really is. It's been stuttering like crazy. It makes it look like this is just a slideshow, and it's not. It's really smooth. I mean, at extreme settings and hitting almost 30 frames per second, I'm not going to complain at all. It is really aggressive. Looks like it's finishing up that run there right at 39 degrees Celsius. I'm going to go ahead, let this run through the second run, and then it's going to hit the CPU test. The CPU test is where I really want to see how it goes. That's going to tell me, once it taxes it, compared to the 71 degrees Celsius that I had from the last cooler. So, comparatively speaking, we'll see how it goes here. So it looks like this run we're setting 19 to 23 frames per second on this. There is a lot going on in this scene though. There's dust particles everywhere, there's light rays, there's reflection, shadows, soft shadows, and aliasing. I mean, there's a lot going on in this image. There's some depth of field, motion blur. I mean, it's got pretty much everything in this test. That's why I like 3D Mark. It does a really awesome job. At the same time, it is a synthetic benchmark. It is not a true reflection of how gameplay is. But if I had a game of this level of detail and everything maxed out and hitting 30 frames per second like I am with this, I would definitely be completely satisfied. I would not complain in the least bit. So I was trying to catch the temperature there really quick in between the tests, but wasn't quite fast enough. But I know the first time I ever ran 3D Mark with my old processor, this test was horrible. It stuttered so bad it was like 1 or 2 frames per second. I mean, it was terrible. With this new AMD Ryzen 3900, it has no issues. I mean, it stutters a little bit. I think it's hitting, let's see here, on my display is showing 13 frames per second, which is not bad with as much as what's going on there, and it's straight CPU. So, I mean, that's really good. This is a lot of stuff that it's doing between the physics and, you know, just the actual graphics itself. Like I said, this is why I ran the 3D Mark Extreme, was for this specific test. As you can see, it chewed through that pretty easily. Definitely a lot better than AMD's old CPUs did. I'm not going to complain. I don't regret using AMD at all. Now let's see if I'm going to regret this cooler. Here, maxed out. Well, 72, that was like right at the very beginning there for the loads. But on that, looks like right about 70 degrees Celsius, which is right at where I was pretty much. I was at 71 degrees Celsius with the other cooler. Now, score-wise, I did score higher this time, about 800 points higher. I think I was at like a 3800 before. This time I hit a 4600. I'm not going to complain at all. I don't remember exactly what my scores were before. Let's pull up just the 3D Mark times 5. As you can see, I've been a long time member of 3D Mark. I mean, I've used it all the way back actually to 3D Mark 2001. It's just unfortunately they don't show that anymore. But I mean, I've used them for a long time. I've erased a lot of my scores. Half my scores aren't even here anymore, but you know, it is what it is. But my score, not bad at all. This was one of the last ones I ran right here. This is what I ran just when I first installed this cooler. Was right here on the 21st. I wanted to go through, yeah, you can see my times here, 5:36 a.m. I was kind of up late that day. But this was right after installing the new cooler. I maxed out everything I could, overclocked a bit, ran the tests, trying to heat the processor up, cool it down, heat it up, cool it down again. The cure, you know, just a cure process on the thermal paste. Like I said, I was manually overclocking at the time to try to really warm the processor up. This time I set it back to all defaults. Hit just a 600 points less, but 800 points more than what I did with the other extreme. So I'm not gonna complain. Overall, I mean, good score. CPU score is good. Temperature wise, not gonna complain the least bit. And now I'm starting to get stupid emails, and I love it. Cooler wise, I mean, I didn't really gain a whole lot on CPU. Yes, I'm running it at quiet. Overall, it does really good. I like the RGB, I like the LCD. My main thing is I really enjoy the extra cooling for the CPU socket area. That's one of the things that your water cooling really lacks, is cooling that area of your main board. I could probably go through and tweak my system and the settings a little bit more, eliminate some of the running processes, some of the background programs. Sure, boost my scores up higher, but again, I just wanted to run it what the average person is going to run it as. I wanted to see if Joe Blow down the street buys a PC, installs his favorite games, runs a couple of standard benchmarks that he saw online, doesn't really know what he's doing on cooling, just sets it, to keep it quiet. This is what he's going to see, and that's what I'm trying to reflect to you guys. I'm not seeing any performance improvement over the Corsair water cooler. I will say their software is a little friendlier, and it definitely does work to control it perfectly fine. I had no issues whatsoever with the Corsair software, controlling fan speeds, controlling noise, my lighting controls. Everything was really easy. The only thing I will say is the Corsair IQ or ICU or however it's pronounced. I think it's IQ. Definitely does eat some processor though. It runs a little aggressive for my taste, but it's not horrible. It did good though. But on that, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. I really appreciate you tuning in and watching this. Again, this is part 2. I am trying to get part 1 the audio to work on it. For some reason it did not record any audio. I'm trying to see if I can recover that or not, but that was why at the beginning I included all the temperatures for what I ran on that. Hopefully 3D Mark ran starter free this time with the new settings. If not, I'm just gonna give up on getting that to run. And I've tried pretty much everything I can think of and all the tutorials that I can find online to try to tweak the settings in OBS. The only thing I can think of doing is trying different streaming software, but after already getting this program, I really don't want to have to buy anything else. I'd rather save my money. But I can see my CPU temperature here is spiking up into the 50s, so it's probably doing some updates in the background right now, so I guess I caught it at a good time. But I'll let you guys go. Again, I appreciate you tuning into my channel. Like and subscribe if you could. I'm still a very, very small channel. I don't have very many subscribers. I am not monetized. This is all just for your guys' information. I would love to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. So, I mean, if you can recommend me to your friends, I'd really appreciate that, you guys. Anything to help out. Again, I'm not looking for monetization. I'm just looking to try to help people out and give information. So, you guys have a great night, and I will see you all the next stream. Okay, welcome back to my channel, you guys. I appreciate you joining me today. I did want to let you guys know I am doing a follow-up to my last review on the Asus Ryujin 360. I had a viewer ask if anybody has gotten this thing even running correctly. For the longest time I've been fighting with it. That was part of my review. That it was just really noisy, and I didn't really see any extra cooling from it. It wasn't ramping up like it was supposed to. It just was pretty much running straight. I was using Asus Armory Crate to control it. I thought I had everything set up correctly, but I couldn't adjust anything permanently with Armory Crate. Every time I tried to adjust the fan speeds, I could get the pump fan, I guess you want to call it. It's the little fan, 60, I think it's a 60 millimeter fan that's mounted on the actual pump itself, on top of the socket, the CPU socket, to help cool off the surrounding area. I could not get that thing to run any quieter. I could put the setting in Armory Crate, it would go quiet, but as soon as I exited that tab or exited Armory Crate, it was right back to being loud again. So I've been living with it being basically a jet taking off in my my computer area here, and just chalking it up to you know, there's something faulty with the software, you know, whatever the case may be. If you can hear right now the difference between my last video and now, there's nothing. It's running nearly silent now. And if you look on the screen, what I have on here is Fan Expert. It is running with the Asus AI Suite 3. Comes default with the Asus board, obviously. It was something I had installed before when I had my Corsair cooler, because I could control the Corsair stuff, but there was no way to control my motherboard fans. So I had to still use something else to control the fans that I had connected into the motherboard headers. So I had used Fan Expert. Well, I didn't realize it, but it had a default fan curve on there for the CPU. And as you can see on here, it actually picks up the Republic of Gamers Ryujin. So it was applying those default fan speeds to the Ryujin 360. And it was basically overriding the Armory Crate. So whenever I would make the settings to Armory Crate, they would stick until I exited, and then it defaulted back to Fan Expert. Problem solved. I will say I actually like the fan controls here better than I do on Armory Crate. They're very, very basic in my opinion there. Here it's got it actually separated. This one that's the fan 1. This is actually the socket pump fan, whatever you want to call it. As you can see here, I have a decent fan curve set up. I've it set to 30% for the minimum, which, looking online, that is the minimum fan speed. It will not run less than 30%. So I have it set to 30% up to 30 degrees Celsius, and then it just ramps up from there. Keeps it pretty quiet. Right now it's running nice and quiet, other than my furnace just kicked in. It is chilly here. On the other one here, the regular Ryujin fan, this is actually the 320 millimeter fans around the radiator. I have these set to 40%. 30% on here will actually turn those off, so it runs silent. I did not do that because I still wanted to have some airflow going through there. I noticed with it turned off, my CPU temperatures were hitting 40, 42 degrees Celsius, which still is not bad. I'm not going to complain about that. But I wanted to try to keep the CPU a little cooler. I like the 30s for ambient temperature, 40s maxing it. Now, one thing I did notice, if you notice, I have this running along with the MSI Afterburner. For the CPU temperature, it's reading 43 degrees on here. It is actually the CPU package that picks up, not the CPU die. So that is, for those that make a difference, total package is running at 42 degrees Celsius. I still like to know that, but I also like to know what the actual CPU die is running at. I mean, 31 degrees Celsius is not bad. I'm not going to complain. 42 degrees Celsius still isn't too bad, especially running at this fan curve. I'm not going to complain at all. My last complaint was I didn't see much of a temperature difference between my Corsair H110i GT and this one. Now, granted, that was a dual 140 millimeter fan radiator. This is a triple 120 millimeter fan. So, size-wise, I mean, it's a 280 versus 360. Not a huge difference there. I think by the time you actually figure out the area of that, there's not much of a difference in the area. So I mean, it's touch and go. I did keep that one at a pretty low fan curve. It was always kept on quiet. I never kept it on extreme. That's what I wanted out of this, was I wanted to keep it quiet as well, and it's doing great. Before, when it was ramping up, it was louder than my furnace was. My furnace is one room away. So if you can imagine how, I mean, it's not a loud furnace, but, ambient-wise, it's still, probably, 30, 35 decibels. So, I mean, it's noticeable, but the fan on this was a lot louder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run some benchmarks here with this setup for you guys, just so you can see the difference in it, and hopefully hear the difference as well. I'm only going to run Cinebench R20. I'm going to do multi-core. I'm not going to do single core. Just time it takes to run the single core is a lot longer than the multi-core, and it doesn't pump as much heat. The multi-core, really pumps a lot more heat than the single core does. So let's give this a shot. Okay, so on here it's showing 71, 72. There goes the fans kicking in. You can see on the fan curve. You can see here 70 degrees on the package, 60 degrees on the CPU die. So I mean, it's kicking up like it's supposed to. I can definitely hear it now. It's a lot more audible. Again, I'm not going to complain. I could probably kick the fan on the actual socket down some more. I don't necessarily need it to max out like it does. And there it goes, ramping back down now. It's definitely going back down. It's a lot quieter. Yeah, we're back down to the 40s again. This hasn't quite caught up yet, but I mean, it's showing 27 on the motherboard, 39 on the CPU. Again, guys, I mean, I'm not going to complain. It's doing a lot better. Speed-wise here, I'm 12 points off, so I'll call that margin of error. Let's go with Cinebench R15. And again, we'll run multi-core. There it goes, kicking up. Got up to 72 degrees, 71 degrees on the package, 60 again. Did awesome. Not going to complain the least bit. That definitely is doing a lot better job. And scores there right along with what I normally get. This one was where it actually was overclocked just a hair, so I'm not going to say the benchmark score. Let's see here. How about I would do 3D Mark again, but 3D Mark Extreme really does a great job taxing your processor. It doesn't do any more than what I saw Cinebench do. Probably my only complaint is that for some reason OBS Studio, which is the program I use to record and stream with, I have checked every setting, I have tweaked everything I can, I have gotten online and sought help changing all my settings, the bit rate, the output, the codec, everything that I can think of, changing, and for some reason only on 3D Mark it stutters whenever it does the actual benchmark. The screen is fluid. It runs butter smooth. It hits on extreme 30, 35, 40 frames per second. But on the output for you guys, it makes it look like it's just stuttering along and it can't keep up. And that's not the true performance. I don't like showing that. It's in the first part of this video from when I did the original review of the cooler here. You can see it. It looks horrible. I've had people comment on it, but I can't do anything about it. If any of you guys are experts or know a fix for that, please by all means reach out to me. Let me know. More than happy to invite you into a conference, video conference, screen share, whatever you want to do. Please, I'm begging, if any of you guys know a fix for it, I would love to fix that because I'd like to be actually show the benchmarks like they're supposed to. What I will do instead, I'll run a Geekbench. This is just Geekbench tryout. It's not licensed. It's just the trial edition. So you're going to see that it's a little slower launching. Obviously, it's in tryout mode. I'm just going to run CPU benchmark here, see if this heats up the processor at all. It's ramping up a little. There, it kicked up a little bit more, but it's not really ramping up much. It's spiked to 63 there. It's in the 50s to 60s. So I mean, it's not taxing the processor all that much. CPU clock is kicking up to 4650. So I mean, it's definitely boosting, and it's actually going above the rated overclock, so I'm not going to complain. I had a few times apparently above the 4600 mark, so problem fixed with the overclock at least, so I know that it's cooling enough. We're in the Clang render camera, sitting right about 68, 69 degrees Celsius, 52 degrees Celsius on the CPU die. It's doing really good, you guys. There it goes, kicking into high. So it's gotten to the high 70s there. There it goes, kicking back down some. You can see the chassis fans kicked up there. The PCH fans up at 2200. Single core 1272, multi-core 12904. So I mean, it's not bad. I'll take it. Not gonna complain. Overall, did really well. And looks like my pain in the butt dog, which would be my male husky. Looks like he's staring down at me. So that must mean he needs to go out. So I'm going to take that as this video needs to end. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you visiting my channel. Please like and subscribe. Let your friends know, especially if you enjoy the content. Let them know I do have lots of other content on there besides just computer building and parts. I also have gaming on there. A lot of this is just fun for me, you guys. I just enjoy passing on my knowledge or being able to help out. Especially when I can review a good part or review something that's kind of latest and greatest like this is pretty much new. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Until then, you guys take care. Have a good one. Be safe.